Hi, this video is going to describe how to prevent and treat such common plant diseases like, for example, black spot, other leaf spot, downy mildew, powdery mildew, blight, canker, or any other. In this video, I will give you a few important methods or steps of how to prevent and treat those diseases. Once you understand the principles that I will explain, you will be able to treat almost any disease which is caused by fungi, or mycetes, viruses, or bacteria, which I will call in this video pathogens. The video is quite long, so you may want to check chapters if you are interested in some particular way of prevention or treatment those diseases. However, I recommend that it's best to actually watch through all of it to get the best information and be able to treat this and prevent diseases in a complex way. The first method I'm going to mention is use of disease-resistant plant. New varieties of plants are being developed all the time, and one of the important directions of selection is producing cultivars that are disease-resistant. Development of disease-resistant plants has been relatively successful in annual plants, however less so in biennial or even less in perennials. The reason for that, of course, is that it's much faster to develop this selection for annual plants, even though it takes many years, sometimes even tens of years to do it. And of course it's much more difficult and time consuming to do it for perennial plants because it multiplies the number of years needed to do that. Depending on the disease, you might have fully resistant or partially resistant plants. For example, for tomato blight, there is currently no fully resistant tomato varieties. However, there are some which are more resistant than others, so it takes for them longer to get infected and to get the disease, so you are able to receive your harvest even if other varieties are already diseased. But that's just one example. But I should say, to generalize, that development of resistant varieties has been more successful for specialized pathogens, so those that are very specific to specific plant rather than those that affect variety of plants. So, for example, you can find fairly resistant varieties for smut fungi, powdery mildew, but less resistant, for example, for many blights like potato blight, tomato blight, canker, root rot, and leaf spotting pathogens. Another important and practical strategy is to use pathogen-free planting materials. For example, seeds, seedlings, trees, or so on. Therefore, it's important that you buy your plant materials and seedlings from a reputable supplier that could introduce those screening measures that could ensure prevention of pathogens coming to their planting materials. For example, viruses is a huge issue for potatoes, so it's very important that you don't buy potatoes in a supermarket to plant. However, you buy a properly grown potatoes specifically for growing. Another method is pre-treatment of your seeds to reduce the number of pathogens that might be on those seeds. I'm not going to talk about this in detail because I have a detailed video which is called How to Jumpstart Your Seeds, where I cover this topic in more details. I just want to mention here that you might find, for example, seeds which are already pre-treated by a manufacturer, or you can get seeds that are not pre-treated and pre-treat them yourself. How best to do it in your particular situation depends, and it's very difficult to give generic recommendations on this, but do watch my video for more on this. Removal of diseased plants is another important strategy. It can take different forms. For example, removal of tree branches which are infected by rust or brown rot. Or, for example, it's sorting bulbs before planting to remove those that you can see are already diseased. The diseased plants usually have millions or even billions spores on them, which are very easily spread, even with wind. So often removing one or two diseased plants on very initial stages of infection can significantly reduce the spread of the disease or delay it. What's important is when you remove the diseased plants, you don't use them in compost. You completely remove it from your garden. You can put it in a bag and throw it away together with your usual garbage, not the organic garbage, or you can immediately burn them. And immediately is also very important, because if you do not, then these pathogens can still spread in the place where you store them. Also, I should mention that burning agricultural waste is controversial because of the pollution which it creates, and in some countries it's even prohibited. Talking about removal of diseased plants, I should say that it's especially important for viruses. Viruses for plants are very similar to viruses for humans, in a sense that it's very difficult to treat them. Currently, there are no effective treatments for viruses, so if they pass the immune system of your plants, then it's likely that there is not much you can do. And at the stage when you see the signs of this disease on a plant, it means that it's too late to do any prevention or even treatment. So in this situation, it's best to remove this plant directly from your garden. What you need to do is take a shovel and very carefully remove this diseased plant from the soil, together with the roots and with the soil. Don't move it too much, just remove it, put it in a plastic bag, for example, and throw it away or burn immediately. Crop rotation is a super important agricultural method in preventing spread of diseases. Crop rotation basically means that in the same place you don't grow plants from the same family 2 years, 3 years, several years in a row. Usually it works very well for soil-borne pathogens, and many pathogens are very specific to a specific family of plants. So for example, downy mildew of cucumbers is caused by Pseudoperonospora cubensis, or downy mildew of grape is caused by Plasmospora viticola. So these are two different pathogens, and if you have for example, downy mildew on your cucumbers, and then next year you plant grape, it won't spread, right? So never plant plants from the same families after the previous plant is removed. For example, if you grow tomatoes, then don't plant in the same spot next year potatoes or eggplants, or don't plant cucumbers after pumpkins. In most cases, about 4 years of crop rotation is enough, which means you can plant the same family of the plants on the same place on the 5th year. Obviously, it's easier to manage crop rotation with annuals than with perennials. However, please do try to do it even with perennials. For example, for strawberries, after they've been in the same place, for example, for 3 or 4 years, change the place to another area. Or when you remove an apple tree, don't plant a new apple tree exactly in the same spot. Based on the same logic, mixed plantings are also better than plantings of the same crop or the same plants next to each other. For example, have you noticed that in a forest or in fields, you would never have a big batch which is infected with some disease? It might be a single tree, but it wouldn't be a lot of trees together. Similarly, if you go to fields, for example, wheat fields, it's common to see that there is a big area of plants which is infected. So similarly, if you do the mixed plantings, because disease easier spread in proximity, so it's easier to jump from a tomato plant to a tomato plant which is nearby, than from tomato plant to a tomato plant which is 1 meter away, or from tomato plant to basil, which grows right here. So then by mixing your plantings, you prevent spread of diseases rapidly. It's not as easy to do in farms. However, it's pretty easy to do for gardeners. There is a lot of different plants which are recommended to plant together. There are also some plants which are not recommended to be planted together. So do study this carefully, and I will eventually make a video about mixed plantings and also about crop rotation, because these are very simple agricultural methods that would allow anybody to prevent a lot of diseases and to ensure better nutrition for your plants. Another method worth considering is establishing a physical barrier between your plant and disease. For example, raising planting beds will assure good soil water drainage, and as such reduce risk of stem rot or root rot. Another example, using mulch to mulch your beds, because then you would create this layer of mulch and all soil-borne pathogens would find it much more difficult to go through mulch to your plant rather than directly from the soil to your plant. Another important method which is often neglected is to ensuring that you provide good nutrition to your plants. Similarly, to humans, who do you think would have more strength to fight disease? A well-fed person or a malnourished person? Similarly for plants, if you provide good nutrition for your plant, where they would get everything that they need, they would have more strength to fight diseases, and they would be more healthy, and the bonus, you will get more harvest. Not many people know that inorganic fertilizers are actually not that good to the plants from this point, because they generally weaken immunity of the plants and make them more susceptible to diseases. Therefore, I do recommend use organic fertilizers to provide nutrition. For example, grass clippings, cow manure, composted animal manure, compost, ash, and other organic fertilizers. In terms of inorganic fertilizers, a very easy way to get to understand when you're buying it that it's an inorganic fertilizer is to see if its NPK content is mentioned on it, because in most of the situations that would mean that it's inorganic fertilizer, and I do not recommend using them by home gardeners. Watering is another very important factor in spreading disease, which is very often neglected. If it rains, or if you're using sprinkles or shower pipe for watering your plant, what happens is that those drops of water comes to the soil, gets full of pathogens, and then little droplets goes to infect your plants. And when in fact these pathogens already have water, so that they can better spread, because you know that all the pathogens or anybody, anything needs water in order to multiply and cause disease. So what you can do, the first one, which I cannot recommend highly enough, is to ensure that you cover all your plants with mulch, so that when drops of rain, for example, come, to the soil, they don't come to the soil, they come to the mulch, and thus you reduce spread of diseases. Another way is if it rains, for example, often, you can cover your plants with agricultural textile. Some water would still soak through. However, first of all, it wouldn't be such a huge pressure like with rain, and secondly, it will be also less water that will come. And then the third way to manage this is to use for your irrigation drip irrigation, so that the water comes directly to the soil, to the roots. And when you are watering in any other way, ensure that droplets don't come in contact with the upper part of your plants, and water as close to the soil as possible. Similarly to the above, plant spacing is also another very important way to prevent and treat diseases, because if you ensure wider distance between plants, then the plants will have less humidity there, which comes from evaporation from soil or from transpiration of your plants, and then with the wind this humidity would go away faster, and then you will have less possibility to get disease spread. Now here we come in to talk about fungicides. I'm sure everybody is thinking, finally, here we are talking about concrete treatment. Well, a few notes which I hope you will find very useful. First of all, fungicides are used to treat diseases or prevent diseases which are caused by fungi and oomycetes. Just as a side note, oomycetes were originally grouped as fungi. However, after further research, scientists decided that they are too different, so it would be two different groups of plants. And those diseases that you might thought were caused fungi are often caused by oomycetes. For example, potato blight, tomato blight, downy mildew, Phytophthora rot are all caused by oomycetes. However, because the separation into fungi and oomycetes is very recent, the term for solutions that treat them is still fungicides. Now, fungicides have been used for more than 100 years, and new fungicides continue to be developed all the time. Now, the fungicide which is the most popular, which you probably know, is called Bordeaux mixture, and it's based on copper sulfate. It's still used today in various forms. However, not everybody knows that copper is toxic. It's toxic for your plants, for your soil, for your pets, for your children, and even for you. So I do recommend to avoid using a Bordeaux mixture or any fungicides which is based on copper. Or at least, if you are doing it, read the manual very carefully and use it according to the manual. It's not as simple as you could think, because to treat different diseases on different plants, you would require different dosage, and it's very important that you also have a waiting period after using them. So you cannot treat, for example, with Bordeaux mixture your strawberries and eat them the next day. In addition to Bordeaux mixture, there is also a big number of different systemic fungicides, inorganic fungicides, let's say synthetic ones, which are developed and which are still being developed. However, they are also not safe, and I do not recommend them to use for home gardeners, for hobby gardeners. Many of them are used specifically by farmers in a specific way, specific concentration, taking into account weather, rain, and so on. So it's very difficult to use them safely at home by a person who has not been taught how to do it. And believe me, you cannot teach yourself by using YouTube videos on specifically on that. People spend years doing that. So I would not recommend you to use them. Also, taking note that inorganic fungicides, depending on the type, some of them are not available in some countries. Even some of them are only available to farmers. Some of them in some countries are available in normal garden shops or supermarkets. So obviously every country have different regulations. However, I want to emphasize that even if it's available in a supermarket in your country, it doesn't mean that it's safe. My plea to you, do not use them. Also, last thing to mention on that, fungicides, inorganic fungicides, have generally a very narrow range of active disease treatment or prevention. So you should have a specific fungicides for specific disease, which means that you have to first identify the disease that you have. And many plants, especially in rainy weather, are susceptible to many diseases. So you're not going to use 5 fungicides, right? Or you can diagnose your disease incorrectly. At the end, you still have your disease, and you also have your fungicide, which you might have not used correctly. So my recommendation, do not use them, inorganic fungicides or even copper-based fungicides. And with this we go to the next one, which is biological control, also called biofungicides or organic fungicides. Luckily for us, now world trends are shifting towards use of organic biofungicides and limiting use of agrochemicals. This leads to a lot of research in those areas, and new organic preparations are coming to the market all the time. So biological control, which you do using these organic biological fungicides, means that you use one living organism to control another, something that is happening all the time in nature. So you would not have, for example, one bacteria or one fungi easily spread, because you like spread to the whole world or continent or countries, right? All because you have other let's say useful microorganisms that prevent them. And there is always this balance in nature, which unfortunately, because of the current practices in agriculture, are not that well maintained in our gardens. Now, if you are using the biological fungicides, basically what you do is that you get those good microorganisms that are helping you, and you are applying them where they would prevent or treat the disease. Now, there are several commercial biofungicides available. They might be different in different countries. Some of them are more widespread than others. So I'm not going to give you examples and the trademarks because of these reasons and because it's not a video of advertisement, but I will give you two agents which those biofungicides are based, and you can search those in your countries. So the one is family of Trichoderma, which is a fungi which is active against many different diseases, different pathogens that cause diseases. And the second one is Bacillus subtilis, which is a bacteria which was first discovered on hay, and both of them are very widely used in agriculture, and Bacillus subtilis even used in human nutrition. So using those, you generally do not have any waiting period, and you can just spray your strawberries or tomatoes, wash them, and eat in the same day, which is very useful. But also using those biological fungicides, you gradually build health of your garden and prevent spread of disease in future. What you need to know by using them is, first of all, that they are generally more less specific than inorganic fungicides, and so one of them target more pathogens for different diseases. Secondly, there are different strains which sometimes are active against different pathogens, more or less. So do read manual before using them. There are lots of years of research before they are released in the market. So in the manuals you would see exactly what it's active against, so that you can make an informed decision when and how to use it. Another important thing to note is that biological fungicides are only active from about 8 degrees Celsius and above, or 46 degrees Fahrenheit and above. And this is important to know that when it's too cold, for example, you cannot treat yet with biological fungicide, which is fine because the pathogens are also not yet active. So no need to treat yet. You cannot just have one treatment and kill all pathogens. You will have to have repeated treatments. Usually the recommendations is every 10 to 14 days as preventions, from the temperature being +8. However, if it's raining weather, pathogens spread much better because they need humidity. Right? For example, your fish in the fridge spoils faster than dry fish because there is more water. So similar, your pathogens spread faster if there is water, which means that you need to have your treatment of biological fungicides more often in rainy season. Sometimes you might even want to have it every few days if you have the rain all the time, because during rainy weather your disease spreads very rapidly. Before I go to a recommended method, which I recommend everybody for the management and control and prevention of plant diseases, I want to say the following. I think that this video is packed with a lot of important information. From the first view of this video, you might not realize how much information in it. What I recommend is to finish watching it now. If you want, of course, you can watch it again, but it would be better if you like this video, so that in YouTube, in your YouTube channel, you can always find this video easily. And then in a few days after you give a thought to it, you watch it again, because I believe that by doing this, you will discover more useful information than just watching it once. Another thing is do leave comments in case you have any questions, and I will try to answer all of them. And also I do leave comment if any of these methods that I mentioned is very important to you and you want to know more, so that I can consider recording a video with more in-depth information for some of those methods that I provide. With this, we are going to talk now about the method which I recommend, which is a complex way of managing your diseases and using all of the mentioned methods. It's very important, similarly to humans. As you see, I try to make as many examples as humans as possible, because I think it's better to explain it. So in humans now, when you have a disease and you go to a doctor, they do not generally just prescribe one medicine. They prescribe several, so that you tackle this disease from different angles, root cause, symptoms, and so on. The same with the plants. None of the methods that I mentioned is 100% effective. However, the combination of all these methods will allow you significantly reduce the incidence of diseases, and with time, I would say, if you follow these practices, couple of years, you will almost forget about the diseases. And when you forget, don't stop using them, because they will come back. Just keep doing all the methods which I mentioned in this video, and I'm going to repeat them again. So the first one is growing resistant plants. Then using pathogen-free planting materials. The third, using pre-treated seeds. The fourth, removal of diseased plants. Fifth, crop rotation. Sixth, mixed planting. Seventh, establishing a physical barrier between your plant and disease. 8. Providing adequate nutrition to your plants. 9. Watering. 10. Not using inorganic fungicides. And the last one, biological control. And as I mentioned, all of them should be used by you in order to prevent and treat the diseases. And prevention is always better than treatment. With this, thanks for watching.